you can't blame people for saying the wrong things. 99% of the time, their intentions are good. But the things that were really tough to hear were them trying to solve the problem. Like, just don't stress, or go on a vacation, or just adopt, or just use an egg donor, or all these things that are perfectly good options, but they are extremely serious things that have their own set of grieving processes and their own set of mental, emotional things that it was very hard for me to talk to someone and say, well, I've seen you freak out over so much less, but yet you're just telling me to relax and then I'll get pregnant.
There are many infertility memoirs out there, but the stories shared in the book, The Underwear in My Shoe, My Journey Through IVF Unfiltered, left me laughing, crying, and sometimes cry laughing. Set in New York City, Brett Russo did everything right. Great college, great husband, great career, all on track with her friend group until they all got pregnant and started their family, and Brett didn't. That's just the start to quite a journey. Brett, welcome to Baby or Bust.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Set the scene a little bit. When did you first think about starting to try? I mean, was this right out of college or kind of a little bit later in life?
I met my husband later in life. We had met when I was 35, and we were married, a year later. And when I went to the gynecologist initially, I said, I've heard I'm a little old to start trying, and she goes, oh, honey, not in New York, you aren't. Don't worry about it. And with that, I, took a few genetic tests. We seemed compatible. And I took a year off to just travel with my husband and do things, never even thinking I would have an issue. I had perfect periods. I was an athlete. I had no, the obvious, quote unquote, well, not obvious, the things that when you know nothing about infertility, what you think is you're fine. And I knew nothing about it. So then we started to try, and 6 months passed and nothing. You start to get nervous. You have people around you that are starting the same time and they start to get pregnant. You start to get a little worried, but you're still like, no, that's not me. That's so not me. And I think that's a big part of it. No one feels like they're going to be that girl. So then I went to a fertility doctor, still not even thinking this would be me, still in denial. And then we started treatments, and as I got further and further along, I found myself right smack in the middle of being an IVF patient, and there I was.
Yeah, not what you were expecting. And this is kind of New York City. What time frame?
2017.
Yeah, pretty normal for people in their mid-30s or even late 30s to not even be thinking about starting a family. But your friend group, your family was starting to kind of get pregnant around you. Was that sort of happening as you were trying?
Oh, yeah. Most of my girlfriends had already at that point had babies, no problems. Everybody was fine in their early 30s, mid 30s. It was unbelievable. In the time that I started trying and went through IVF, all 3 of my sister-in-laws were pregnant. And that was awful. There's a lot of feelings that go along with that. I'm a huge family person and always everyone's cheerleader, but that was really painful. And I not only felt bad about feeling that way, but I felt guilty about feeling what I was feeling. I was neck and neck with my brother, my twin brother, my closest best friend ever. And he was going through it and he got pregnant. And I think they even felt bad about being excited. And I felt bad about that. I hated that I had to feel bad about it.
Your first IUI, and you went after the treatment, kind of hopeful and excited that you had this treatment that you knew was just going to work. And it was Easter, and that's when your brother announced the pregnancy. And can you share how that happened?
Well, it was funny because the IUI was the first stage, right? And we had it that day, and I was so inside that and everything that I kind of just forgot everything else that was going on. And we were heading down to the beach, and my mom called us halfway through, and she's like, guys, are you coming, or should we wait for you? I'm like, wait for what? What are you talking about? And they're like, the announcement, they're going to announce it. And I was like, oh my God, I completely forgot that was happening. And here I am having all of these feelings of like, is this going to work? I just, the most unromantic thing. You're basically like getting a baster inside of you, and it's not romantic and it's not what you envisioned. And there's a lot of emotions with that. And then all of a sudden, I remember I got to the front door And I walked in. We have this big Italian family that everyone kisses and hugs, and everyone knows in 1 second if you're a little off, So I walked in and just ran to the bathroom because I knew if I saw my mother's face or something, I would just lose it. And I did. I went in the bathroom, cried, and washed my face, came out, and faked a big smile. And they did their announcement, and everyone cheered. And it's hard, you say, oh, that should have been me. I was the one that this should have happened for. And, those things that, you don't think that way. I never thought that way. I wasn't like a jealous person. I'm not like, this is unfair or whatever. But this is big. It's really big. And it's hard and it's lonely because there's not a lot of people, one, that are open about it. So they may have gone through it, but they don't know. And two, people that haven't been through it love to think they know what it's like. And it's not malintent, it's very good intent, but they just don't get it. And it's very difficult to get advice from people that haven't been through it.
That reminds me of the story that you talked about when you went to the barbecue with your friends. It was in the middle of your first IVF cycle. You described how this party is something that you guys had done basically since college. In the beginning, it was all like singles or couples, and they were talking about their hangovers and what they were doing, that weekend. And then year after year, pregnant bellies, and then toddlers, and then kids. And you're showing up at this annual event bloated from your shots and kind of trying to think, how am I going to get to the bathroom to do my shots? And that's where you ran into Camilla. Can you tell us about Camilla?
That was a rough day. You have syringes in your bag and ice packs and all these things. Camilla is a friend's wife of mine. They had just been through freezing eggs. I think because they just weren't ready to have kids yet. And, she's very into her career and, they weren't ready at the time. I saw her face the whole time I was there. I was like, I know she's going to bring this up. I just, I didn't want to talk about it. Nobody had brought it up. It was just a very sensitive subject. I was literally the only one there without kids. She caught me and she started saying how, I didn't think IVF was that bad. She immediately thought like IVF was like egg, freezing. Mm-hmm. And not to take away from egg freezing. I'm sure, you're bloated and you have the hormones, but, the part of IVF that's so hard is the unknown and the sense of failure and you don't know if this is going to work for you. You're already in a situation where you've had some hurt and you've had some disappointment. So when she was comparing it to the same thing, she just kept saying, well, I didn't think it was that bad. I don't really know what the big deal was, and kind of forcing the issue. And I just said, well, it was kind of like the worst year of my life, and just ran off crying because I was just all hormoned up. Yeah. And you're just on another level of sensitivity and I guess feeling bad for yourself, but it's deserved. I mean, it's a really hard thing to go through.
And that's what's so hard. A lot of your closest friends and family, no matter how much they love you and try to help, they very often say the wrong things because they just don't get it.
I know. A big thing I learned later, unfortunately, usually when you're off hormones, is that you can't blame people for saying the wrong things. 99% of the time, their intentions are good. But the things that were really tough to hear were them trying to solve the problem. Like, just don't stress, or go on a vacation, or just adopt, or just use an egg donor, or, all these things that are perfectly good options, but they are extremely serious things that have their own set of grieving processes and their own set of, mental, emotional things that it was very hard for me to talk to someone and say, well, I've seen you freak out over so much less, but yet you're just telling me to relax and then I'll get pregnant, because we know that that's not true. It makes sense. And a lot of times, someone adopts and then they get pregnant, and that's a beautiful thing. But that's not actually a medical thing that happens.
Yeah. Did you ever find out, exactly what the problem was, or, when you're working through and trying to think through what the treatment options were?
It was age for me. I think that the eggs, we were having trouble not only retrieving eggs, my counts were low. They were on the low side of normal. So even when some of the tests came back, it wasn't like they were super low, but I was definitely further along in my menstrual woman process than a typical maybe 38-year-old. That was the hardest part. It was going through a round and then feeling like you had to do it again. And then you have to get your hope back up, get your everything, your adrenaline, your relationship with your husband, everything back up. and you get there and then you get pushed down again. And that's, I think, I've spoken with a lot of women through the book and people who have read it, and that's a very common thing, is that you don't realize the amount of failure that goes with IVF. You just think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to a round of IVF, I'm going to get the eggs, and then it's going to be great. I'm going to have twins or this or that. And it's not the case. There is still a lot of hurt within this process. It's a very difficult process. And I think that's what kind of surprises everyone, because I don't think most people are prepared to be that patient there. It sounds cliche, but this is not your fault. And the sooner you believe that, like, say it to yourself, because it's not your fault. And I remember visiting my second fertility doctor, and I went in there with a whole list of questions. What if I do acupuncture? What if I eat less gluten? What if I do all this stuff? And he just looked at me and he said, Brett, this is not your fault. And it just caught me off guard, because I didn't even realize that I was putting all that on my shoulders. But in that moment, I realized that as females, that's something we're just supposed to do, right? We're just supposed to be a mother. We're supposed to be able to do that. You want your husband to see you pregnant. You want to just do what it seems so easy for everyone else to do. And it's just hard when all of a sudden that there's a halt and there's nothing you can do. You can't try harder. You can't think about it more. You can't eat more gluten, or less gluten, all these things that you want. You want that to be the case. You want that to have a substantial difference. And I'm sure there's research behind all of it that does help in certain, situations. But the sooner you know that it's not your fault, I think you'll be saving yourself a lot of heartache.
I counsel patients about that a lot. Like, yes, your overall health is important for your reproductive health. And so you do want to eat well and sleep and manage your stress and move your body. But there's a very close tipping point around like being healthy, but letting it spiral into sort of this shame and blame cycle. Like, oh, okay, I didn't get pregnant that cycle or that transfer, therefore I must have not been following the regimen or the diet very well. So I'm going to restrict even more, right? Because I feel so out of control in this process that if I can control what I put into my body, if I can control the supplements that I'm taking, I can stop feeling this emptiness and this sadness. And so it's so good that you had a provider and someone in your corner. Like, how did you deal with that kind of push and pull?
There's a few parts of this. One, I think, which is not necessarily an answer to your question, I think there definitely has to be more education around getting pregnant and the realities. I mean, there are simple things that I learned in that first time I sat in the fertility office that there's no reason I shouldn't have known. I blame myself for not educating myself. I really, in my heart of hearts, never thought it would be me. And I think that a little bit of education going into my 30s, maybe through my gynecologist, maybe they said it and I didn't want to hear it, but I think that would have been really helpful. There's a lot of what ifs. There's a what if I got married younger? What if, you start doing the counting on your hands? The loss of a month when you're going through IVF or when you're trying to get pregnant is devastating. And it feels just 1 month. What difference does it make? But it's one period cycle. It's one more month that you're just delayed and you're just stuck and everyone else is moving forward. And it's hard because when people move forward with kids, they don't have time for this. And that's fair, but it's sad. The one thing I didn't do is give up hope. It's important to latch on to someone that's been through it, because that will help you. I mean, that's a big resource to have, and it's someone that understands. You may not call them back. You may be crying. You may want to tell them the results. You may not want to. They just understand all of those emotions that go along with it. If you want to be a mother, you will be a mother. And I know that there are a lot of paths, and all of it takes a certain amount of emotional grieving and understanding and all of those things, but don't ever let any circumstance in life say, I won't be a mother. If you want to be a mother, you will be a mother. And sometimes you can't be afraid to change your ending. And I think when I was able to grasp that concept, it let me breathe a little. You can breathe a little. I'm not saying that's easy. That is a process in itself. You may not be there. Don't put pressure on yourself. Just let yourself feel what you're feeling. Do not make yourself feel better. Don't say, oh, I have to feel better. I have to be positive. I have to be this. Just feel what you feel. You have to get it out because it will come back to haunt you. But anyway, so I was at a pretty low point, and you get obsessed with, I needed to have my eggs, my children, in my mind. It was tunnel vision. I was waiting for a train, or I was waiting at a bar, and I saw someone that I knew. And when you are going through IVF, you don't want to see anyone because they're going to ask if you have a baby. They're going to ask if you have a family, and you just don't want to have to tell them things that are not true for you. So we made eye contact, and she came over, and we started talking, and there was just something about the way she was asking me questions about my life that I just somehow knew she had been through IVF, something. There's just a feel. I had opened up to her. She said, "Oh, do you have children?" I'm like, "Oh, we're actually going through IVF." And she goes, "Oh, well, I went through that too. But I have a daughter now." And, starting how much she loves her and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, she's so lucky that she's on the other side of this. I was so jealous that she was on the other side because I was in this, should I go for another round? Should I just try to transfer it? It was really hard. My husband and I were fighting about it because he was like, let's just put it in, see what happens. And, I'm thinking of kid 2 and 3, not even about kid 1, it's just, and she said, "Do you want to see a picture of Cecilia?" I said, "Yeah." She showed me a picture, and it was, this dark-skinned little baby. And in the moment, I realized that it was adopted baby for her. And the looking at her face, though, in the picture that she showed me, I actually get choked up thinking about it because it was just the look of a mother that finally had her child in her arms. And I just realized in that moment that being a mother is so much more than getting pregnant. It's something that's inside of us. And it was just a moment that I'm like, I'm ready to be a mother. I'm ready to be a mother, whatever that looks like, And I said, let's go through these transfers. And if that doesn't work, we'll move on to the next thing. And I think everyone in their journey has that moment where you say, I'm just ready to be a mother. And
there is something about being in the midst of it when you're just banging your head up against a wall where at some point, if you're able to just surrender to the process, that does not mean giving up, not necessarily thinking about due dates anymore, or how far apart the kids are going to be, or all of that sort of like stair step, comparing, feeling left out of the parent club. If you can just sort of surrender a little bit, and you've touched on it a couple of different times.
I remember in that same sitting with my friend, with the adopted daughter, she said to me, one day you'll look down at your baby and it will be the only baby you were ever meant to have. And that resonated with me because between miscarriages and the loss and all the different, you get attached to these embryos. I mean, they're out getting tested and you're like literally decorating the nursery already. And there's so many stages of loss in this. And it is true that when you do finally look down at the baby, you're like, God, there's no other baby I was meant to have than this baby. And it is true.
I just remember this one family weekend you described where you said all 3 of your cousins were pregnant. They're sitting by the pool. You're the only one like with a cover up on because you're covering up your belly that's full of shots, and they're covering up their pregnant bellies. And
that summer was tough. That was tough because, I'm sitting there with my cousins and literally pregnant people just kept coming up on the deck. And here I am. I was so hot, but I didn't want to take off my shirt because I had all the black and blues on my stomach from, multiple rounds at that point. That was my lowest. That summer was the lowest point for me mentally. You feel like, people love you, so they don't want to talk about it in front of you, and they don't want to, but it's like you don't want them to talk about it in front of you, but you don't want them not to talk about it in front of you. You want to be there for them, and you don't want to be like, oh, it's the elephant in the room that you can't bring it up. And so it's just kind of like this mind game. It's just a crazy thing. But it's hard. I don't know if it's because you notice it more when you're trying to get pregnant that you just think everyone around you is, or it's just that stage of life. I mean, for me, it was a joke. I mean, I had 3 sister-in-laws of 4 that were pregnant while I was going through my treatments. I had, a cousin, 2 cousins actually. And it's hard. It is hard. And these are my best friends. And it's just hard. And you feel bad about feeling bad for yourself during those moments.
And your family that you've grown up with and you love and they love you, it's harder to be around, trying to be in the middle of grieving, but also having to educate people about IVF. It's so hard.
It is hard. And the things they say are so hurtful. And you don't want to be oversensitive, but it's just hard to roll with some of the comments. And I am not a sensitive person. I mean, my mom's always like, you think like a man. Nothing really makes me feel bad. And I'm a very positive person. And this knocked me on my back. I mean, I felt at a very weak part. I couldn't find the positivity. I was really struggling. And now a lot of women will reach out to me, strangers, just because they read the book and they appreciate it, and they'll reach out. And I feel in those moments like there's just such a sisterhood of, we've all been there. You don't have to do the background story. There's no background story when you're talking to someone that's been through it. And, in those moments, it brings you right back, and you realize that we're all there in this together. Everyone's been there, and everyone's at different stages of their journey, but it's something that will bond you with these women and men forever. I mean, you'll be talking to someone and they'll say, oh, I went through that too. And you're immediately just taken to this place where you're there for each other. And sometimes it's just nice to talk with someone that knows that it's okay. I'm going to call you, but I don't expect a call back.
Infertility is a club that you really don't want to join. Mm-hmm. You're like trying as hard as you can to be in the like mom club or like the parent club, and you're not yet. Like the door is just closed, and this other group of people is just so amazingly supportive. You can connect with them on such an incredible level, even if you don't want to be there.
I know. I think a big inspiration for me to write the book was when I started going through it. I was pretty lost. I started looking at other books, but they just weren't, I just couldn't find what felt good. And so I just started writing. And I think that the more that happened, I said, all right, wow, I really have a story to tell. And I think knowing how I felt, it almost got me through knowing this is going to help somebody else.
All right, we got to talk about Leah's baby shower and that dress. I got to hear that story.
This was, some of this stuff, my friends were like, did you make this up for the book? I'm like, unfortunately, I did not have to make this. This is horrible. We had just moved, and that was horrible too. We were in a beautiful apartment in the city, and we had bought this house, and we said, oh, we'll definitely be pregnant by the time we move into the house. And of course, we're moving into this 4-bedroom house with no kids, and it was pretty miserable. So everyone knows it's going through IVF. Getting an invitation to a baby shower is pretty much a nightmare. You'll be mad if you're not invited. You want to be invited, but it is just really hard, especially because 90% of the people are not going to know what's going on with you. And they're going to say, oh, are you married? Are you going to have a baby? No one thinks you're having trouble. I was on the fence about going. I was right smack in the middle of everything. I was bloated. I looked pregnant. I'm not even kidding. I was so bloated from all the different rounds, and I was just in a bad mental spot. So I said, you know what, this is my cousin, let me just go. So I was late because I wasn't going to go. I pulled back my hair in a tight bun, found this dress, this big Hawaiian dress, and I'm like, all right, whatever, I'll just wear this. It fits. It's the only thing that fits. When you just feel so ugly and puffy and nothing's working. Yeah. So I go, I'm walking up this long driveway, I'm like sweating. I open the door, and everyone's just looking at me. And then everyone starts pointing and laughing and all this stuff. And I realize that I have the same exact dress on as my cousin who is pregnant, and it is her baby shower.
It's just a nightmare.
And I am like, and I remember looking across the way, seeing one of my cousins and my mother like panicking for me. And it was hard because everyone's like, we want to take pictures. Are you pregnant? I looked pregnant, and I was bloated. And it was just... And then I wasn't drinking because I was in a round, and they're like, oh, you're not pregnant, huh? One of those. I'm like, no, I'm really not, So I ended up just trying to get through it. And then as I was leaving, they said, oh, wait, we got to take pictures. This is so funny. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is just my nightmare.
It really is. Like when you are going through this, you literally see and you're surrounded by pregnant people everywhere. There's a term for it. It's called frequency bias. And you'll find that I remember having infertility, going through treatments, and I was just like, every magazine stand was just full of pregnant stars or mommy glamour photo shoots and, friends announcements. Oh, social media is the worst. I don't know if you were on social media back then, but I can just imagine wanting to turn it off.
Because people, and this is my biggest problem with social media, everyone posts the perfect picture, right? And that's not life. Whether you're trying to get pregnant or you're a new mom or whatever it is, you're going through a new job, going through an addiction, anything, seeing that is really abusive. Like, it's not a good thing to see over and over again because, one, it's not true. I mean, you don't know. And that's why when I got pregnant, I had to just say, listen, there's nothing to envy here. We went through a journey, and whoever else is out there, like, I get it. And I remember that was the turning point because the next day I had announced that and kind of alluded to the fact that we had issues. And the next morning I woke up and my inbox was filled with messages from people all through my life saying, I'm going through this too. I didn't know where to turn. Thank you for sharing that. And I said to myself, I got to finish this book because people out there need to have reality of what's going on. And I hope the times of women being perfect for each other is coming to an end, because I think there's nothing sexier and cooler than a girl that can just own it and just to be honest. And I mean, that's such a sexy quality about a female. I mean, my cousin right now has alopecia. She's had it her whole life and recently really lost all of her hair. She was out the other night and she has her wig on and we were meeting the new boyfriend of one of my cousins, and she goes, oh, hi, how you doing? And she rips off her wig as a joke. It was the most sexy, beautiful moment I've ever seen her in, because the confidence that she had. You know, there was someone else there who came up to her and said, I have alopecia too. I'm not going to rip off my wig, but I just want you to know. You know, those are the moments where you shouldn't have to feel alone. You know, you want to know that it's okay to feel this way.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's insanity. It's insanity.
How did you and Jack deal with the pressure and the kind of ups and downs? Did you guys do okay? Were you in therapy? You know, what worked for you guys?
I think the important thing that we did was we did communicate. I kind of got obsessed with, I know there's eggs in there. We have to keep going. We have to keep going. And I remember, you know, you're in your own grief that sometimes you forget that they're grieving too. And there were times where I said, I just can't deal with both of our grief right now. And I think in the beginning, everyone's there for each other. But in the middle is the time where you really have to keep communicating. And I remember there was one particular dinner where we were sitting there and I was feeling so good. It was another failed round. I said, we're going to do this and I'm going to keep going. I know the eggs are in there. Let's do another round. And he just looked at me and said, you know, you can't do this forever. And in that moment, I remember thinking, wow, we are not on the same page anymore. And when did that happen? And it was just, I think you have to communicate. It's hard on a couple. I think he had an incredible ability to let me feel what I was feeling when I was feeling. He never told me how to feel, never, ever blamed, and was always just, all right, let's talk this out. How are you feeling? You know, it was a lot of that. He was very good in this situation. A lot of people I've talked to, I think it's hard for their partners to necessarily feel what they're feeling. I was in therapy. After my third round, I knew I was as dark as it can get. And I basically crawled into therapy. I mean, I remember it was like a Thursday and she said, I could take you Tuesday. And I said, I don't even know if I can make it till Tuesday. Like, that's how dark I was feeling. And it's a real thing. Don't think that what you're feeling is fake. I mean, it's hard and it can be really hard and everyone handles it differently. It's not that everyone, but there are some real feelings of grief and it's okay to feel them. Do not feel that this is weird. I mean, you're in it. You should feel it.
To know that there are support mechanisms out there and that there are therapists that really do specialize in infertility and miscarriage. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It can be hard to find that right person to connect with, but I often send people to resolve.org. It's that patient-run nonprofit. They have wonderful lists of therapists and providers throughout the U.S. that really focus on fertility. It can be really, really helpful. All right, Brett, so why don't you tell us what happened?
Both of my embryos turned into babies. You know, we did the first transfer, and that was my first son, and then we went for the second, and, you know, I got pregnant again, so I was extremely lucky that those took.
Congratulations, Brett.
Thank you.
It's absolutely amazing. I imagine it was really nerve-wracking trying for your second, knowing there was one embryo.
And I think that was the big part of like whether to go for a 6th round is because, you know, we only had one successful round in 5 rounds. So, you know, I had to commit to several rounds and I did want multiple children, but I think especially after connecting with Janine, you know, that friend of mine, I knew if I wanted more children, like I would have more children. I think adoption was what I was thinking at the time. But yeah, I mean, I do feel very lucky that the story ended like that. And I do feel that when you do become a mother, there is a degree of perspective that you're blessed with. because you had to fight to get here, right? So you're not as mad about the late nights. You're not as mad about the little things. You know, you've dreamed about those things. When I first went to the gynecologist, like I graduated from my infertility doctor, and I was like thinking that I was going to get there and everyone was going to like want to hear the story and was like going to be so proud that I was there. And I remember thinking like, wow, my finish line is everyone else's starting point. Now I'm just even. And It was amazing how like this fight and this emotional and physical crazy battle I fought just got me to even. And I do think that there's a lot of guilt when you're going through pregnancy because you're like, oh, I wanted this, but I'm so tired, I'm depressed, I'm this. It's okay. Like you're like everyone else. You're allowed to feel what everyone else is feeling, you know? As women, we're so hard on ourselves. And I think like everyone has to just relax.
Any words of wisdom as you think back through your journey or things that you wish that you had known earlier?
Anyone out there who is either single or thinking of starting a family, I mean, educate yourself on your own health and do the homework way before it's even an issue. I mean, I have several friends that actually froze their eggs while I was going through this for that reason. And it's something I obviously wish I did at 30 years old. I mean, most people will never have to use those eggs. But if it's an option for you, I think that was something that I would have liked a little more education about it, but that was my particular situation. I mean, there's plenty. I mean, I have a 28-year-old cousin who went through IVF and wasn't ovulating. You know, there's so many reasons why you go through infertility. Age is really just one of them. So that's one thing. But then another thing, you know, I think what this taught me, whether it's with IVF or infertility or anything, be kind to people in terms of what they're going through. I mean, this gave me such an education on everyone has their thing, right? Whatever it is. And most of the time we'll never know what it is. And I think that it taught me, well, I may not know what you're going through. I'm here for you. I think a lot of times I would say, oh, I know how you feel, or, oh, I'm here. Yeah, I get it. Or try to solve a problem. Sometimes it's okay to not know the answer and to say, listen, I just want to be here to support you. That's all I'm here for. I know that I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes, but I'm here for you. And I think that lesson is something that changed me. And it sounds simple, but when you're going through it and you've had the reactions, I mean, it was just something I'm so blessed to have experienced and been able to now move forward with anything, whether it's someone loses their parent or a loss of a child. I mean, so many people, a hard situation, they'll back off. Oh, I don't want to talk to, I don't even know what I would say. I can't ask about that. She, you know, a good friend of mine had a handicapped child recently, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And all I said was, I don't have to talk about it. I can ask questions. I just interact. Don't feel that you have to just back off. You know, you can not know what they're going through. I think someone would appreciate the fact that you understand that you don't know what it's like. Honestly, I feel very blessed to have gone through what I went through, and you will get better for this. You will be stronger for this. I promise you that. I don't know your story out there, and I don't know the details or how it will end, but I do know this is going to teach you things about yourself, and you'll learn things about yourself that you never knew that you could possibly do or be capable of or handle. And you know what? You deserve it, because it's a big thing to go through, and you should be proud that you're in it and you're getting back in the ring and you're fighting every day, because just going to work is a fight. Just putting a smile on your face, just making that sales call in the midst of all of this craziness. Life does go on, and that's the really hard part, is try to like hide this. But it's okay. If you're crying in your office, tell someone, listen, I'm crying in my office. You have nothing to be ashamed about. And I hope people talk about it more. And that was one of my main goals of the book. You know, really, it's okay to talk about it. There's nothing to be ashamed about.
Thank you so much for being here today. How can we find you, Brett?
I'm on Instagram, brusso18. You can just Google me. I have a website, and message me if you have any questions or, you know, just want to connect. I really try to answer as many messages as I can. I'm at 100% right now, so
amazing.
But it's important, yeah.
Thanks for being here today. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with author Brett Russo as much as I did. She shared some incredible stories, but the one that really sticks with me, and this feeling of being left behind, friends and families that are having babies and starting their lives as moms, while she's still waiting for that goal, is that story of the baby shower where she is wearing the same dress as her cousin who is the mom-to-be, and just her having to smile through the photographs and the comparisons and grin through all the questions from family about when she's gonna start her family. It's such a great reminder that you never know exactly what someone else is carrying, what other people are dealing with, and to always walk through this world with kindness and compassion. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. If you like this episode, let us know. Give us a 5-star review and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.